And France woke up this Monday to political uncertainty after a shock result where a left-wing alliance has become now the biggest force in the French parliament. This after tactical voting held back the far right. But the shape of the future government remains unclear after no group won an absolute majority in the second round of parliamentary elections on Sunday. The left-wing alliance coming out on top and Emmanuel Macron's centrist bloc emerging second. A Republican front, where candidates drop out of the race to keep the far right from power, continued to be effective. The National Rally, as a result, coming in third place with 143 seats in Parliament. However, it is its largest seat share to date. This Monday, the Prime Minister tendered his resignation, but Emmanuel Macron has asked Gabriel Attal to remain in his post for now. Let's cross to Peter O'Brien, who's at the Elysee, the French presidential palace. Peter, President Macron has refused Gabriel Attal's resignation. So what exactly does that mean?
The reason given by the Elysee Palace is that Attal will not be resigning to ensure the stability of the country for the moment. What it means in practice is that Attal, as he mentioned he would potentially do in the speech he made after the results came in last night, will stay on in a kind of caretaker role, ensuring the day-to-day function of the country, especially with such important events as the Olympic Games and the 14 Juillet National Day celebrations coming up. Now, the next date to watch out for is the 18th of July, when the new Parliament sits for the first time, whereupon, up until mid-August, there is always this possibility of a vote of no confidence. Now, with this kind of caretaker government, the president is hoping that it doesn't come to that, and he's hoping by doing so that this buys time for this new, very diverse parliament to actually forge some sort of coalition which would be able to get over the absolute majority mark and potentially put forward a government. But it's looking unclear as to whether we'll get that for now.
Peter, we're now looking at a period of horse trading, aren't we? I mean, it's very early days yet, but what is possibly the most likely scenario in terms of that coalition building?
So, in terms of what traditionally happens, it's the prime minister that comes around is the one from that's named by the president as the one from the majority group in parliament, even if it's a relative majority. So that would suggest it's a left-wing prime minister that emerges. But really, all cards on the table. France is going to have to learn how to simply do parliamentary politics in a way that it's not used to. This isn't Germany, this isn't Spain, this isn't Italy. We're not used to having to form a kind of rainbow coalition or a coalition across multiple sides of the parliament in a way that happens in other countries. So many different options are on the table. One thing for sure is that if there is a coalition to merge, it won't include the far-right Rassemblement National. Certainly if it did, that would be a huge democratic scandal after the vote we've just seen. But yeah, basically, we don't really know what's going to happen, and we're going to have to see in the next few weeks and months.
Indeed. Thank you, Peter O'Brien there from the Elysee. And joining me now is Professor Rainbow Murray, a French politics specialist from the University of London, who's going to be with us for the next half hour. Professor Murray, thank you so much for your time. President Macron has refused resignation of his Prime Minister. So what are the possible scenarios that we are now facing?
We are facing the scenarios of either a minority government or some kind of coalition to try and build a majority. And a minority government could also take multiple different forms, because we've already seen a minority in government for the past 2 years. We know that for a minority government to work, it doesn't necessarily need the full support of Parliament. It just needs the tacit support of enough MPs who are willing not to overthrow it for it to continue. So the current left-wing alliance, the New Popular Front, are keen to form a government as they are, but they are so far short of a majority that I don't think they can do it. The centre have made overtures to the other parties suggesting that they would be willing to form part of a grand coalition, which would presumably have them in the centre, not just sort of in terms of where they sit on the spectrum, but also as the sort of the broker between the different parties. The right have made it clear that for now they're not interested in being part of any such grand coalition. So the question is whether these parties can work together. But one of the key stumbling blocks is that the left-wing alliance includes the far left. The far left won't work with the centre. The centre won't work with the far left. So if there is to be any kind of broader alliance, it's going to have to ask the other left-wing parties to decouple themselves from the far left. There is no indication as yet that they're willing to do so. Their willingness would probably depend on negotiations about who would lead any such government, i.e. who would be nominated as Prime Minister. And that's one of the main things that is going to have to be broached at the very starting point of these negotiations.
And the reality is, Professor, even if you manage to cobble together an alliance of the centrist and the more centre-left parties, they still have vastly diverging positions when it comes to green energy and pension reform and so on, don't they?
They really do. And you mentioned pension reform. I think that's going to be a key sticking point. For Macron, it's a flagship policy that he staked his second presidency on. He achieved what many of his predecessors attempted and failed. He has raised the retirement age, and he's done so at great political cost. One of the reasons why his party lost a lot of seats in this election was because of the unpopularity of this pension reform. But now that it has been passed, he is going to be extremely reluctant to throw away something that he has gained at such great cost and allow it to be changed. Whereas for the left, this was also one of their flagship policies to reverse the pension reform, to lower the retirement age back to where it was. So there is going to be some tense discussions about pensions, whether any compromise in the future is possible, or whether that one is simply kicked to the long grass as something that's a fait accompli and can't be revisited. If they don't go back on pension reforms, then Macron is clearly going to have to make some other kind of concessions if he wants the left to work with him. One thing that he could do, obviously, is concede on who becomes the prime minister. Another is that it might be possible to revisit the recent legislation that was passed on immigration, which is another area where there was strong opposition from the left. But any reform of the recent immigration bill would further alienate the prospect of bringing in anybody from the right. So it's not going to be easy. There are no obvious solutions or low-hanging fruit that the groups can work together with. Potentially, maybe with the environment, they might be able to find some easier common ground. But I think anything that has been part of Macron's legacy that has been contested by the left is going to be a sore point in the negotiations.